You are live, it says. We are live. I'm gonna have my phone here. Noch nicht live.
So, 5:01. Hi, everyone. Want to start?
Yeah, we can start. I think it's working now. Recording too. That's great. And I'll leave the floor to you, Thea.
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Thea, and I'm an AI and tech enthusiast. Wow, why did this just feel slightly like a start of an AI meeting? I think there's a lot of AI and tech enthusiasts in the audience. Well, to kind of just briefly say my journey with the whole artificial intelligence, I actually took the other way around, I guess. I first started learning about the tech, did a couple of very simplified programming courses, and was just intrigued by the whole thing. And then I thought to myself, hey, there must be a legal discussion about this too. And as you all probably have guessed, I was right. And so I'm right now trying to stay afloat in the waves of news and information and trying to catch the gist of the tech with what understanding I have. And luckily for myself, I managed to stumble upon Peter, whose enthusiasm maybe even surpasses my own. And it definitely allowed me to expand my horizons, and partially also by starting this series, hopefully series. But to not overdo it, I'm just going to let Peter introduce himself and the series.
Thank you, Thea. My name is Peter. I'm a technology enthusiast by default and a lawyer by chance for many years. Both in my professional and in my personal life, I've been connected to the topics of IT, machine learning, neural networks, and other AI-like systems. And I'm really thrilled to finally have found the courage to bring online the many fascinating discussions I've had with my colleagues on the team, especially with Thea, and share them with a wider audience. Because after all, one is lost when we're just alone. And we both mentioned it. It's a bit tricky to keep up with all the news about AI and regulation especially. And also, if you're a lawyer or a legal professional or a privacy professional, when you're already busy doing your actual job. And yet our clients always expect us lawyers to know everything, everywhere, all at once. Of course, that's not the case, but once we're we signed the engagement letter, we have to become experts and quick. But in the world of AI and regulation, things are moving and changing so fast. Each week we see about 150 academic papers that have an impact on laws and regulation. That's more than a dozen a day. On top of that, there's lots of daily news from all over the world, from Canada to Singapore, from South Africa to Norway. So we thought, why not share what we are learning with all of you? What we'll be talking about today and in the coming weeks with the next episodes, because I mean, we have content for like 5 episodes. It was super difficult to pick the right content for today. So, but it will remain our pick. We will share what we think is important. I hope that's also important for you. We hope you like it. Please feel free to share your thoughts with us here or by DMing us on LinkedIn. We're planning to invite guests who can talk about more specific topics, tech topics, regulation, societal impact. But overall, each episode of our little legal show will be an exciting mix of news about technology, law, and society. So stay tuned. The next episode is coming soon. I'll be sharing the link in the next minutes. It will be probably by the end of June. I think the 28th of June will be our next episode. But okay, today is the day. Today is the premiere day for the pilot episode. And I'll hand over the stage and floor to Thea. Thea, do you want to start with decoding AI regulation?
Yeah, of course. So Peter already said kind of a lot of the reasons behind us starting this podcast, but one other reason is so that I can have a rant on a bi-weekly basis about just how many papers were published, just how many things I'm still not on track with, and how many law, tech, ethics, you name it, articles were published in the last 5 minutes probably. Well, not exactly, but almost. Every time I look at my phone, I have at least 5 new articles that I should have read yesterday. There are 3 new updates, tech things that came out last week, and I have at least 20 messages from Peter with links to some Twitter articles that link to even more articles, and that I should have probably read last week. And while we have...
Sorry for that.
Yeah, well, what can you do? I'm trying. I'm doing my best here, okay? And while we have lawmakers trying to figure out whether the way AI is developed is a crucial component of its definition, for instance, the original AI Act draft, which had very detailed machine learning, logic knowledge-based approaches, statistical approaches, Bayesian estimations as examples of how you can develop an AI system. Then we had just machine learning, then we had nothing in the definition. So a lot of struggling with whether that is even an important component, up to the discussions whether it's best to regulate on presumed or actual risk, having actual risk assessments, or how can you even estimate the risks, to the more general questions regarding the risk-based approaches of whether it's better to use soft or hard law approaches. And while we are having these discussions, we have wild transformative AI models roaming around and blowing up the Pentagon. Or, well, maybe not, but you get the point. We have them calling prominent politician terrorists. Can an AI be guilty of libel? Not sure, but it appears that it can definitely commit libel. We have them trying to break up marriages of famous reporters. We have them threatening to ruin people's lives. That's a particularly interesting one. And we have them even leading masses. And no, I'm not even joking. Yeah, so exciting times we live in, definitely. And the best part, or maybe not the best part, but definitely the most disturbing one, showing just how bad we are at tech neutrality, is that these types of models weren't really covered in the first draft of the AI Act, or maybe were, but were like the weird kid in the corner that nobody really pays attention to. Well, that maybe serves to show us that overly specific regulation attempts are not the best idea, but don't tell anyone that I said that. Well, anyways, for better or for worse, now we have them with 2 broad definitions, some say all-encompassing definitions. And now that we have that settled for the time being, we can continue arguing about what is high risk and why is something a high risk. based, of course, on the technologies that we have today, because who in the world could predict the risks of those of tomorrow? Just to show a couple of most interesting developments of the last couple of months, we had voice simulators emerging in January that were actually transformed into voice translation already in March. So it appears I might be able to speak Chinese right now. I'm not sure. I would probably have to be able to understand Chinese to figure that one out. But at least I can pretend I can speak Chinese. Then we have, for instance, PassGPT, which is here to suggest strong passwords. Didn't we already have that? Well, in any event, now we have it, but it was trained on thousands of actual leaked passwords. Now, who could think of what else could be good to do with that? For instance, hacking other passwords. But yeah, just a wild thought. But anyways, we have it now. Up to prompt chaining, basically simulating our chains of thoughts, but now in the models. So models can actually talk to themselves now, and not even to themselves, but between various versions of themselves. So we have philosophic AI models discussing with each other, with Socrates, Thetis, and Platus, trying to figure out what the best response to our prompt is. And this is not where it ends, of course. We also have overlords governing a bunch of smaller models to give us, again, the most complex answers to our complex questions. And this is all going to come to our phones in, well, what appears to be a very short period of time. Now, if you're not really feeling dizzy yet, we can also mention the latest drop from Apple, brain-machine interface. And one of the scientists, actually, who was working at Apple, this is a direct quote, said that it's one of the coolest results involved predicting a user was going to click on something before they actually did. Now, when we combine that with this oldie but goldie published over 2 months ago now, saying Beyond the Brain, buckle up, it's going to get fun. Because in this paper, they actually developed methods that can visualize what is happening within our brain. Now, I just have one question, though. Can they also tell me what do I want to eat when I'm staring at the menu in the restaurant for 30 minutes? Because that would be very useful. And in case you're still not feeling overwhelmed, all these updates always are, of course, introduced through highly technical papers. So that means you have about 1,000 pages of reading materials every week. And that is not counting the other 1,000 of pages of legal analysis and comments. However, we have two very different problems when it comes to legal and tech stuff. While reading most of the law-related contributions, you might struggle to find actually new and helpful straws to grasp on to regulate this mess. We have recurring themes of algorithmic bias, AI ethics, trustworthy AI, best ways to regulate AI, and so on and so forth, with slight twists depending on the new tech. However, with tech, we have every time something new being introduced through the paper, from new methods of training to new ideal size of model to new ideal way of prompting them. So in a very brief period of time, we learned that LLMs are few-shot learners, but only zero-shot reasoners. We learned that they don't need that much training data after all. And we also learned at the same time that the progress of development is slowing down and AGI won't be reached in the near future, but also that that's the biggest concern we have with actual AI developers saying that they are locked in an out-of-control race to develop and deploy ever more powerful digital minds that no one, not even their creators, can understand, predict, or reliably control. And that's not the best thing about all these papers. The best thing is that they are, of course, or most of them, not peer-reviewed, because to quote the legendary Kimberly Sweet Brown Wilkins after escaping from a burning building and catching bronchitis as a consequence, ain't nobody got time for that. By the time you would have your content reviewed and published, the tech would already be in the Middle Ages of AI development. So good. Now that I got that out of the system, I might reconsider trying to figure out this field of law and get back to something more stable and less exhausting, maybe back to data protection. Hey, at least it changes every 2 days and not every 2 minutes. And in the end, we also asked our buddy to tell us what we should do. to keep up with these changes. And we'll take care of at least 3 out of the 10 suggestions that our friend ChatGPT made to us. We are going to have a regular schedule, updating you with the summaries, and we are going to try and build a community to do so. Let us have burnouts, we don't all need to have them. And now I'm really done and we can get back to business. All jokes aside, one of the reasons was to hold ourselves accountable and to make ourselves stay on track with the developments as well, actually. And for this reason, we are going to mention some of the most interesting papers we stumbled upon, together with brief summaries why they should be interesting to you. And those are all papers that we actually managed to read in the last couple of weeks. So if you're still listening at this point, bear with us for the next 30 or so minutes as we do a bit of deep diving, or as close to deep diving as we can get. And now this works perfect.
Someone very nice commented on your idea of predicting food preferences, that this would be extremely useful, and I like that one very much.
I couldn't agree more, actually. And so now to finally get into the nitty-gritty and why you're all presumably here, the recommendations. So the first one that we can definitely recommend is Michael Beale, Kira Maidas, and Robert Gorba, AI and Global Governance, Modalities, Rationales, and Tensions, published 1st of June, analyzes regulatory approaches worldwide and emphasizes that the question actually is what it is that is being governed, who, by whom, and why, and stresses out the importance of the question who benefits from all these regulations. They analyze different modalities of global governance, and especially emphasizing the most prominent ones, of course, for instance, ethical councils, industry governance, contracts, licensing standards, international agreements, and domestic legislation with extraterritorial impact. They select rationale, they select tensions, a really good, really broad overview, giving a general idea where is this AI regulation going on a global scale. Then we also had Gary Marcus, who published on his Substack 2 models of AI oversight and how things could go deeply wrong. 8th of June, for those who don't know, he's a professor of psychology and neuroscience at New York University, and also an author of a couple of bestsellers, including Rebooting AI and The Future of the Brain. In this Substack, he talks about the experience he had at the Senate hearing on AI regulation, which happened in May, and his strong conviction that world needs an international AI agency to actually address some of these issues. Further, he compares a positive versus a very bleak future of AI regulation, depending on the choices we make today, or that the regulators make today, and also warns about the risk of regulatory capture, which in his sense means government making rules that entrench incumbents and don't take all stakeholders into account. So basically, he's emphasizing that we need also scientific experts being in on the discussion and not just the tech magnates.
We will provide a list of all the papers and news that we recommend at the end of the show, I think in the comments or somewhere where you can find it. So you can look it up and you don't have to copy the URLs or guess the URLs from the screen.
Also very useful. Another very interesting one was by Keegan McBride, AI Geopolitics, Regulation, and Digital Innovation. What is actually going on right now? June 9th, he's a departmental research lecturer at Oxford Internet Institute, and he published his own conclusions and summaries following a series of events on AI regulation geopolitics at the University of Oxford. And some of his conclusions include: no, AI will not bring about the end of the world, but it does bring efficiency. And that means that it brings efficiency both to good use cases and good actors, as well as bad use cases and bad actors. He continues saying that the rules on AI exist, and we are just now debating if they need optimizing. Very interesting argument. I think a lot of people would not agree with it. And in any event, if we are debating whether they need optimizing, we are doing it very unsuccessfully then. And don't tell Gary Marcus, but the creation of new agencies specifically tasked with the monitoring, inspection, or regulation is, according to Keegan, does not make sense. So he says that this is especially true if the context of proposals such as EIEA-like institutions continue. Well, I guess we all have differing opinions. In any case, a useful summary. And now I'll hand it over to Peter to tell you something about what European Parliament is doing.
Yes, I mean, today was the day of the plenary vote and it went as expected, so no further amendments, and Theas maybe is going to tell you more about the real-time biometric identification. But there was a very recent paper. It's from about 2 days ago by Joanna Joy Bryson and Meri Hataya. I hope I have pronounced it correctly. And they are mentioning that the EU legislative process is known for its complexity and very careful and deliberate considerations. And this has led to the implementation of national legislation in other countries that has already been influenced by the EU's AI regulation proposals, even before its finalization within the EU. And the paper describes the outcomes of this European Parliament's initial round of legislative action. And they're saying like there are significant changes. They were introduced into the AI Act, and these changes are seen as either highly significant, but also kind of positive in some ways and very negative in others. And as the debate revolves around whether the AI Act will truly enhance product safety law to continuously improve EU products with intelligence components, or whether it will merely serve as a symbolic window dressing aimed at addressing a few elite actors. It's an interesting paper, and as I mentioned, it is very recent. And there is something else. Tia.
The European Union is not the only one active when it comes to trying to regulate artificial intelligence. We also have the EU Council, which has been drafting the Convention on Artificial Intelligence, Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law since beginning of 2022. However, the progress appears to be rather snail-paced, with the rules being watered down, and what little progress is happening is kind of made behind closed doors, which makes the whole thing slightly shady. But in any event, they introduced, well, a lot of people say even weaker rules. What does this mean? Well, individual countries, based on the latest drafts, individual countries could decide to opt in for the rules to apply to private companies and not just public bodies. This was strongly pushed by the USA, UK, and Canada, which is kind of interesting because what are they actually doing in the EU Council and pushing their own agendas there? But anyways, that is the latest stance. National defense is excluded also from this proposal. There are strong pushes for changing rights of, well, presumably people affected by artificial intelligence into principles, which would further water down the proposal. And lastly, the proposal is ever further away. So it was planned to be adopted in September. Now the committee vote is postponed for March or April next year, with a ministerial adoption awaiting in May or June next year. So quite a long time to go. And we have some more on human rights.
Yes, as AI development affects nearly every aspect of our lives, and its influence will further increase in the foreseeable future, member states must take concrete steps to ensure that people's human rights are safeguarded in the design, development, and deployment of AI systems. That's what the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, Dunja Mijatovic, in a report released last month stated. And the report explores various aspects related to human rights and artificial intelligence. It begins with a chapter discussing the human rights impact assessment that are very important for the AI Act too. The subsequent chapters focus more on human rights and human rights standards in the private sector. That's super important. And another chapter delves into the importance of information and transparency in AI, even though no one knows what that actually means. In summary, the paper can be seen as a comprehensive wish list where the authors express their hopes that at least some of the desires and recommendations put forth can be fulfilled. The representatives of big tech companies are likely shedding tears of sentimentality given those wishes. Right now, at the very moment in Chicago, there's a great conference going on. The 6th annual ACM Fact Conference is underway this year. As I said, in the Windy City in Chicago, this great conference serves as a gathering for researchers and professionals, also lawyers, passionate about fairness, accountability, transparency, not just machine learning, but they call it now socio-technical systems. I was fortunate enough to attend the conference with a colleague of mine. The last time it was held in Europe back in 2020 in Barcelona, and it was an incredibly enriching experience despite our paper on privacy litigation being rejected. I mean, well, let's move on. Are you afraid of algorithmic harms lurking in the shadows? And I have to figure out how to do that here in the browser. This paper that you can see here, Enhancing AI Fairness Through Impact Assessment in the European Union, a Legal and Computer Science Perspective by Alessandra Calvi and Dimitris Kotsinos. This paper just won the Best Paper Award at the ACM Fact 23, like yesterday. And it suggests a promising solution, algorithmic impact assessment, AIAs. These assessments examine the societal impacts of AI systems before, and after implementation. So it's a continuous process like PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. When conducted transparently and inclusively, they foster accountability, according to the authors, public scrutiny, and bridge legal, social, and computer science domains. That's super important for what we're doing here. While the European Union, according to the authors, lacks a mandatory AI impact assessment requirement, certain provisions, such as the DPIA, Data Protection Impact Assessment, the Digital Service Act Risk Assessment, and conformity assessments under the AI Act, they play a role in AI development. And these provisions pave the way for a wider adoption of AI impact assessments, the authors hope. In the paper, the authors also explore various fairness definitions across legal, social, and computer science realms. That's great because a colleague of ours is doing the same in the US. And those of you who have been engaged in this field of AI and algorithmic harms for more than just 3 weeks will likely remember a remarkable paper from 2019, republished, updated until 2021, I think, by Gian Claudio Maggieri and Margaret Kaminsky, called Algorithmic Impact Assessments under GDPR, Producing Multi-Layered Explanations. In their article from time before the pandemic, in their article, the authors demonstrated how a data protection impact assessment, when utilized as a algorithmic impact assessment, establishes a connection between two aspects of algorithmic accountability within the framework of GDPR. Individual rights on the one hand and systemic governance on the other hand. That was a great paper. I loved it. And we applied it for during the development of a privacy-friendly data management platform back in the day. The next one. The next one is, if you think AI risk assessments are just a bunch of useless art, think again. The University of St. Gallen kicked off the grand challenge for the EU AI Act 2023 earlier this year. I mean, I think it was in January. They called on teams to evaluate an AI system that they have never seen before and make sure it complies with the AI Act. So they're basically doing lawyers' work, I guess. This event, inspired by famous DARPA engineering challenges, is the first of its kind in social sciences, according to the university, and it's a hands-on gig with real industry tech involved. Teams from around the world will gather in St. Gallen in July, this July, to tackle the AI Act implementation. And guess what? The winning team gets a whopping 100,000 Swiss francs. That's a lot of money. That's serious, and this grand challenge also shows what it takes to deal with AI regulation. Strong teams, interdisciplinary work, and the guts to face unknown challenges. But that's not all. We have another wonderful open letter, a warning letter now in the New Yorker. There's another warning letter from AI researchers and executives, and this one is meant as a bit of a joke. Okay, and we're being annoyed with this cookie wall. And they also state in a humble tone, representing themselves as a group of overeducated and overcompensated executives, that they were writing the letter with the intention of capturing attention and promoting action regarding AI before it reached a critical point. They expressed deep concern about the imminent risk of human extinction and acknowledged their own involvement as the leading AI researchers and executives who had contributed to the current dilemma. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe it's time to start freaking out. Whether it's about AI, the hype surrounding it, or the climate catastrophe that we are currently fueling with the CO2 emissions from the AI model training data centers, that's up to each of you to decide. The impact of generative AI is yet unclear. But there's another paper helping us finding an answer. According to the authors, there is currently no official standard for evaluating the social impacts of generative AI systems in various modalities. We're talking about multi-modal systems, such as text, image, audio, and video. They propose a standardized approach to evaluating these systems, focusing on two main categories: evaluating the base technical system and evaluating the societal impacts. I mean, that's okay, it's not surprising, seems obvious. And the base system evaluation covers 7 societal impact categories, including bias, privacy, environmental costs. That's smart. The evaluation of societal impacts encompasses 5 overarching categories, such as trustworthiness, autonomy, inequality, labor, and creativity. Creativity, what does it have to do with us as lawyers? We will see about that. Will AI take over our jobs? The Washington Post had a great article about people those jobs were taken over, and that reminds me, because I'm old, that reminds me of a great interview in Wired from 2016. Barack Obama and Joy Ito, they were interviewed about neural net self-driving cars and the future of the world. It's a great interview, you should read it. And President Obama said, low-wage, low-skill individuals become more and more redundant, and their jobs may not be replaced, but wages are suppressed. And if we are going to successfully manage this transition, we are going to have a societal conversation about how we manage this. How do we make sure that folks have a living income, and what does this mean in terms of us supporting things like the arts or culture, or making sure our veterans are getting cared for? Very American view on that. So the social impact has to accommodate these new technologies, and our economic models have to accommodate them. So that's great. That was in 2016. It doesn't speak much for our predictive capabilities as humans. And that one here is an actual thread from the ACM Fact Conference yesterday in Chicago. There was a very interesting thread on Twitter about the real-world facts of generative AI replacing photojournalists and other jobs, for instance, here. And they're replacing their jobs is not nice. And I quote, "A point being made now in the discussion is that art has always been shared. So much is sure. But that's different from it being cannibalized by corporations without artists' consent." You remember the no AI hashtag or tag in the source code of websites and others that is constantly being ignored, as you can see if you are have the time to scroll through subreddits in the evening. In 2016, we believed that the evolution of technologies like robotics and autonomous driving would primarily impact low-skilled jobs. But, oh boy, we were wrong. Turns out it's the current generative AI that's actually wiping out creative professions. Well, thank goodness legal professionals aren't known for their creativity, which might just protect us from the upheavals in the job market. Does it? Now for something completely different, who needs fancy tax lawyers when you have large language models? This paper here dives into the fascinating world of LLMs applying tax law. They may not be expert level yet, but with improved performance in each model release and a little prompting magic, LLMs are showing promising legal understanding capabilities. Brace yourself, legal profession, because the rise of autonomous legal reasoning powered by LLMs might just have you rethinking your career choices. And because it's so funny what we're talking about in this AI-driven game of life and death, are we disposable by design? That's a good question asked in this article here from early June. Let me quote, "The net effect of neural networks acting in the world is necropolitical. In other words, AI-assisted decisions and exclusions aggregate life-preserving pathways for some, while subjecting others to iterative neglect. An algorithmic condensation of social conditions result in the acceleration of differences such as racialized deprivation or disability. To put it crudely, AI can decide which humans are disposable." So maybe the fears around AI are, something to consider more. So there is the obvious question of how to govern, regulate, block, stop, or deal with AI in a very witty take on the subject. The article by Elizabeth Pinieris, the article dives into the world of AI regulation and the recurring pattern of calling for new laws. AI has to be regulated. Remember the tweet by the OpenAI founder. And they're always calling for new laws and institutions without effectively enforcing existing ones. The article highlights the need to adapt and repurpose existing governance mechanisms rather than constantly starting from scratch, drawing parallels to the way generative AI tools build upon existing data. With a touch of humor, the article by Mrs. Ranieris suggests that instead of reinventing the wheel, we should fine-tune our current tools and laws to keep up with the rapid advancement of AI and future technologies. I think that resembles the words of the FTC commissioners last week in the case of FTC versus Amazon Alexa. The abuse of child data, machine learning is no excuse to break the law. My good friend, our good friend, Odia Kagan, she's a LinkedIn star. I think you all know her. She is most famous for her brilliant summaries. She published a very great summary of that case too. But that's not all. There is something that can be done, right, Tia?
Yeah, well, to wrap it up with the legal papers that we decided to mention, there's a great paper by Vera Liao and Jennifer Wortman-Vaughn. Also, hope I pronounced it right. The paper is part of the Gender Shades project, deals with a lot of transparency issues around these models as well as algorithmic bias issues. And other than emphasizing what we all know, that new approaches need to be developed, taking all stakeholders into account, taking into account novel types of LLMs, new technologies, so on and so forth. They do provide some interesting examples. They do provide a good overview of the existing and possible methods forward. So there's actually something actionable in the paper. They lay out 4 common approaches that the community has taken to achieve transparency, namely model reporting, publishing evaluation results, providing explanations, and communicating uncertainty. As I said, very useful overview and gives a very good start as to how can we solve some of the problems that we have. But now, as I said, to wrap it up with the regulatory stuff, we are going to dive a bit into tech. So we had a great paper, Faith and Fate, also great title, if I might add, Limits of Transformers on Compositionality. Basically translated into plain English, limits of transformers in solving complex tasks. So the authors investigate limits of these models across 3 representative tasks: multi-digit multiplication, logic grid puzzles, and classic dynamic programming problems. These tasks all require breaking problems down into sub-steps and synthesizing these steps into a precise answer. However, what they find is that transformers solve these tasks by reducing multi-step compositional reasoning into linearized subgraph matching, without necessarily developing systematic problem-solving skills. Now, again, what this means is that they are still trying to recognize patterns in complex tasks, and the problem is that complex tasks usually don't have a pattern that can be recognized. Basically, their conclusion is that transformers' performance will rapidly decay with increased task complexity. Moving on, another great paper, Hu et al., Chat Database, Augmenting LLMs with Databases as Their Symbolic Memory. Basically, you can think of this as an attempt at fixing AI amnesia. They say that mainstream LLMs are not taking full advantage of memory and their designs just because they are influenced by our biological brains. So they return back to the tech and they insert another symbolic or SQL database, which serves as a sort of a symbolic memory. Non-symbolic stays the vector representations extracted from the training data, whereas symbolic is something that you can think of as something that we have in the brain, so something that is in the background and gives you certain understanding about more complex ideas and concepts. They validate the effectiveness of the proposed memory framework on synthetic data sets requiring complex reasoning and apparently achieve positive results. Well, this one, now to move on, I already mentioned in my rant, Hugging GPT, solving AI tasks with ChatGPT and its friends in Hugging Face. I just love these titles. I don't know about you guys. In any event, they propose a framework for an overarching LLM models that can use other LLM models or other completely different models, so not excluding different types of data or outputs that can be produced by these models, to offer presumably an answer to complex questions. They say that the approach works well, but is highly dependent upon the capabilities of the underlying language models and only works for a fixed number of well-documented APIs. An interesting example for this, actually real-life example, would be Jarvis by Microsoft, which can do a lot. But in any event, it's a slightly scary, but definitely interesting development in the tech world. And to wrap it up, well, kind of returning back to our point that LLMs can't deal with complex tasks, we also had a paper end of May. Oh, that is interesting.
The link doesn't work, I'm sorry.
The title of the paper is Ghost in the Minecraft, generally capable agents for open world environments via large language models and text-based knowledge and memory. They are playing around in the Minecraft world. Why? Because it's a relatively complex world, resembling in a lot of ways the actual world. And in this world, they designed agents equipped with logic and common sense capabilities that can again be governed by an LLM, which can then navigate these agents and presumably also navigate complex sports reward environments with text-based interactions. They developed structured actions leveraging the LLM's capabilities, and this research actually shows the potential of LLMs developing this long horizon complex task management and adapting to uncertainties in open world environments, which is kind of completely opposite of what we had at the beginning, that they're not good and they're never going to be good at complex tasks. So this is kind of the problem with non-peer-reviewed papers. Of course, we're going to have to wait and see who is right or who is
That's
more
true.
right.
And
But
it seems like they just discovered teamwork, right?
Exactly. And this suggestion also kind of combines the ideas of Hugging GPT and SQL memory database, because it has both or something similar to both of those.
True. And if we have a closer look at the current developments in compressing models, we just chose one of many papers. There is an interesting development there. So if you've ever been to Rome, you may have noticed the abbreviation SPQR there. It was pronounced Senatus Populusque Romanus, Senate and People of Rome. Right, so however, under this name, some tech people thought it might have been a good idea. There's a new technique and a format that allows large language models, like capable large language models, to be compressed near lossless, so they fit on every mobile phone and therefore into our pocket. So this development, a friend of mine who's working in this field, he said, okay, by the end of 2023, everyone will have their own proprietary large language model on their phones. And I thought he was crazy, but turns out I'm not as skilled in the field of computer science as he is, and it's great to see that this is going to happen. But also, that's going to be a mess if everyone has their own model, and those models interact, as we have seen before. What does that mean for the application of the AI Act and the roles? Am I a producer, an importer, a user? Whatever.
No, you're no longer a user. Now
I'm no longer a user.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So, but there's something else: green screen and computing power.
Yeah, to loosen it up from all the tech papers, now we're going to look at some cool articles. This is actually maybe a bit like an older one from February. All you need is a green screen and some computing power, and all of a sudden you're a movie producer. Definitely going to be revolutionary for the movie industry, at least according to some. And here I thought it would be fun to actually quote in 1859 Charles Baudelaire, who wrote an essay bemoaning the latest disruption of the art world, which was the camera. So Baudelaire believed that camera would make painters lazy and other artists too reliant on the camera to work for them. And this is kind of a similar dilemma. So we have people claiming that this will revolutionize the industry and nobody will bother to make real movies, or maybe it will. Or maybe we will have them both. So in any event, February 26, anime, rock, paper, scissors, 7-minute video was published. It featured the aesthetics of gothic anime with two men engaging in an epic bout of rock, paper, and scissors. The next Baudelaire is probably somewhere on social media and he's dunking all over this. But in any case, some severe copyright concerns and, well, they are just not to be neglected. And to quote Eric Francisco on Inverse op-ed, he summarized it pretty well. It sounds fancy, and on a technical level, it is. It is also plagiarism. While art has always featured aggregation and remixes, from reinterpretations of Shakespeare to the work of Andy Warhol, AI is dispassionate and devoid of a message. It takes and produces only a facsimile in return. Again, there's going to be a lot of diverging opinions on this one, but copyright concerns are a thing. And proving that copyright concerns are a thing, we also have Google rewriting history. Google is actually inserting AI art into history. So for the second time in just 1 month, so this is an article from 31st of May, and we had the first instance at the beginning of May, Google search engine has allowed an AI-generated fake of a famous artist's work to rise to the top of its search results. Now, do we actually want an inaccurate search machines? This definitely raises the stakes, and they kind of need to deal with the situation that they made for themselves. But this particular instance happened. So when you Googled a Dutch Baroque master, Johannes Vermeer, you would not mention AI, you would not mention a specific painting, and you would receive among top results an AI-produced rendition of the painter's classic Girl with a Pearl Earring as a top result. Definitely concerning copyright-wise. You have anything to add there, Peter?
No, I think it's like the stochastic parrots paper that was written by Timnit Gebro and Margaret Mitchell. And it's the question is whether it is like actually creative, and is creativity something that humanity needs to move on. I'm not so sure about that. We will see in the future. Yeah, but currently it looks like some professions might, yeah, become extinct, unfortunately.
Well, that kind of is a very bad place to move forward, but we'll do that anyway. Do language models know when they're hallucinating references? Presumably not, and it appears all it takes is actually asking them. Really good paper, again, end of May, says that current state-of-the-art language models can actually fix or admit their own mistakes only if you ask them twice. This was done completely black box, so none external influences involved whatsoever, and they did consistency checks done with direct queries, meaning asking the model directly, is this correct? As well as indirect queries, asking the same question in repeated session a number of times. And they came to the conclusions that these consistency checks are found partially reliable indicators of whether or not the reference is a hallucination. So for instance, differing authors would be offered as an answer when you would be querying in different sessions for a work that, well, that doesn't exist or that the model doesn't know the answer. However, it would consistently identify authors for any real references. So this definitely suggests that the hallucinations are more a result of generation techniques than the underlying representations the models have. And it also fits well with what Jan LeCun reported at the end of March, when he said that the models don't have an understanding or a common sense. They don't plan their answers. They just offer you statistic probabilities based on your query.
Like it's just a small percentage of the possible answers is the right answer, and unless you offer, like you fine-tune the models or you tweak them into having an actual understanding, what does house mean or red mean, they can't figure out what that is. That's also why I'm quite calm regarding them like taking over the world. But there are definitely professions that are very worried about the impact of generative AI. So if you work at a school or university and are worried that all student written work is exclusively synthetic AI text, a recent study shows that stable watermarks, how stable watermarks can be, and that they exist, because there was another paper like a couple of weeks before that says like the false positive rate of the current systems detecting AI watermarks, there is that stunning 30%, which is very, very problematic, to say the least. But here in this paper, it was like published a couple of days ago. The researchers, they delve into the potential challenges of using watermarking as a means to combat the proliferation of machine-generated spam and valueless content on the internet. I mean, that's a gigantic task, valueless content in the internet. I mean, that's the internet, basically. They explore the reliability of watermarking in realistic settings where the watermark text may undergo modifications. There are like make it more human plugins already for Google Chrome, and human paraphrasing or integration into longer handwritten documents. Despite these attempts to manipulate or dilute the watermark, the study reveals that watermarks remain detectable. They created a watermark with I think a llama-based model, and then they tried to detect it with other models. So the study reveals that this watermark remains detectable with statistically significant leakage of original text fragments, even in paraphrased versions, as long as the input is long enough, like up to 500 words. So the research also considers alternative detection schemes, but that one is really interesting. And to not just focus on the risks, but also on the chances of all of that, there is another great paper by Eason Mollick and Lilac Mollick, and he has like a great Twitter account, so about like teaching with AI, assigning AI 7 approaches for students with prompts, and that's kind of an entertaining twist. They highlight the incredible promise of AI in education while acknowledging its potential risk. The paper explores their various ways students can directly engage with AI tools in the classroom, emphasizing the critical role of teachers in responsible implementation, whatever that means, with 7 intriguing approaches discussed, including AI tutor and AI teammates. So students don't have to spend money on tutors. Remember the idea of having an LLM run on your phone. That might be your best friend in the future and also your teammate. And the paper offers a playful, thought-provoking glimpse into the potential of AI in education, also with prompt samples that are like really cool, I have to admit, and reminding us that with great power comes both exciting possibilities and a need for caution. Great responsibilities. Thea, that's talking about synthetic text and content.
Talking about synthetic text and content, not to omit mentioning the biggest players, GAFA. EU now wants to force them to label all synthetically made, so AI-generated content available on their website, social networks created by their tools, even before the rules on this actually come in force. This is probably a relatively straightforward proposal. It also goes hand in hand with some of the obligations from the Digital Services Act. However, the questions remain, are they always in the position to recognize AI-generated content when it's not generated by their tools? Does it make sense to label synthetic if almost everything is synthetic? So a lot of questions, but definitely a worthy proposal.
Unlabeled synthetic content will become even more relevant if you have the obligation to label it as synthetic. I mean, we see it with SEO content.
That's true. And to move on to some of the newest updates by some of the GAFA, Meta previewed generative AI tools coming to WhatsApp, Messenger, and Instagram. They have consumer products introduced for WhatsApp Messenger that are basically AI chatbots. They have AI stickers that could be sent over these two, and they also have or want to implement tools that would allow photo editing for Instagram stories. In addition to these internal-only tools, they also introduced their new AI productivity assistant that is now available for the employees at Meta. They could have conversations with the AI agents and then provide feedback to help the company improve its systems. Interesting, we'll see, as if some of these applications are not worrisome enough without them. And moving on with the worrisome applications that become even more worrisome when we combine them with AI, this was an article about Snapchat. End of May, Snapchat or Snapchat AI bot encouraged, I think she was 13-year-old girl to meet up with a 35-year-old man, suggested ways to hide the meeting from her parents, and gave tips on covering up bruises. Very exciting, what every parent wants to hear, especially if his child has Snapchat and, well, if it's a child and has a phone, it will probably have Snapchat as well. To end with some of updates regarding Google, On the 9th of June, they introduced a generative AI platform now available to everyone. You can fine-tune and deploy customized models. You have various models like word completion, embeddings API for text and other foundation models, and so on and so forth in their model garden. And you can use this model garden to access and evaluate base models from Google and its partners. There are over 60 models already included, and they plan on including a lot more. But this is not all that Google is doing, or at least trying to do. They also tried to introduce BART to the European market, which was blocked yesterday, actually, by the Irish Data Protection Commission, because of insufficient information about how its generative AI tool protects Europeans' privacy. Amid an AI race, Google appears to have lost. At first, it was a bit hesitant. It had seen a lot of issues that, for instance, ChatGPT was facing in Italy and other countries in Europe. And now that it finally decided to make its move, it appears it can't. We'll see if the privacy issues are resolved in any time soon, but for now they are blocked from Europe.
That's really interesting because I mean they didn't say the same about Meta. I'm not even sure like who's the controller there for Meta, if it's like Meta Ireland or a Meta in the US, but still Google. I think in the end Google might win the race. Because of their experience and the amount of data that they have already collected about us over the last decades. But in the end, it's gonna be really, really interesting times. So we're about to finish the show. Thea, how did you like today? And do you think we still have time for a couple of questions, if there are any?
I think we can take in a couple of questions. We definitely spoke a lot. It would be nice to have some feedback. There has also been some conversations in the chat, but maybe we should wrap it up until the people come up with questions, if they have any.
Yeah, we have about a 30-second delay in the for the live stream, so it's not that live. There was a comment about like the Canada and the United States having the status of observers at the Council of Europe. That's absolutely true, right? And yeah, and also a link to the recently adopted AI Act, the final version. That's also great to see in the comments. Wow, what an oversight. Yeah, okay, that was helpful.
It's a broad oversight.
Really, we would love your feedback because we want to do the show again, and the next episode. I mean, we initially we had like content for at least 5 episodes. We had to select very carefully, and we want to tell a story with every episode, and every episode should in the future focus on a very specific topic, let's say transparency or privacy or just technology. We will invite other people from the field for at least like 15 minutes of fame here and have them explain their view. So if you're interested in doing that, helping us out here, that we would love to have you here. And maybe the audience for that will grow. I mean, in the end, we are still lawyers. We still have a regular job, and we're doing this just for fun. Thank you. Could GAI, like Tarat Basirian is asking, could a GAI, general or generative AI, resolve its hallucination issue using better quality data set and becoming actually an AI assistant? I'm not a computer scientist, but as far as I understand the critique of autoregressive large language models, the problem is in the autoregressive way they create their content. So without an actual representation of the outside world, that is what Meta is trying to do at the moment, and others are trying to do at the moment. They won't per se get better, they will hit the wall, so to say. Lots of
Based
interesting
on
content.
my reading of all the recent articles, I think what could actually help is combining more of these models, so actually making them discuss with prompt chaining and things like Socratic AI. However, the problem is then when all of them are wrong and all of them miss it and you over-rely on their answers, then the hallucinations become an even bigger problem. However, yeah, it
And
would
it's
probably, in the short run, at least solve some of the issues.
one document, one paper that got lost and did not survive the selection process was about the actual cost of like prompting and of the the computation costs of all of that. So if you have like it already costs a lot of money to compute a long prompt, say at 16,000 tokens or so. And if you have models talking to each other, any inference will cost money. So maybe it is like super expensive. It's going to be super expensive because you would have like to improve the result. You would have to do calculate the objective, the possibly correct result at inference time. So at the same time. So maybe that is too expensive at the moment or not even feasible, but I would love to have an expert on the show here next time or during the next weeks. That would be very helpful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Tia, next episode, what do you think?
Next episode, 28th of June. The event link is going to be posted in the comments. Peter, do you have it?
I'm gonna find it. Thank you. I'm gonna find it and post it here. It's basically the same name, RegInt, second episode.
And we're definitely going to have
the LinkedIn thing.
Have a focus, have a bit of a deeper dive. So episode 0, our pilot episode, was more laying the land and figuring out where we are at the moment so that we can actually have a starting point to make deep dives from. So that is our plan for the next episode that's going to be in 2 weeks.
So that's great. And I'm going to post the yeah, 2 weeks, and here and thanks to you all, and have a great evening.
Rest of the week.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.